All right, guys. Today we're only going to do 6 examples. So let's begin. Okay. These are going to be solving ax squared plus bx plus c, so a trinomial, equals 0 by factoring. Now the a here represents when we have a number other than 1 in this position. Okay. So let's begin. Notice here we want to set it equal to 0 because that's just the easiest way to factor and solve. So let's go ahead and subtract 4 here, and since this is a constant, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 4 to the other constant on the other side. So I'm going to get 0 here, and then simplifying on the left I get 2x squared minus 9x plus 7. Okay, so now let's go ahead and factor like this. We're going to go ahead and split up the 2x squared into 2x times x. So notice here, if I multiply 2x times x, I get 2x squared. And the 7 here, remember it's just going to be 7 times 1, but I have to position it in a way so that when I combine my like terms in the middle, I get negative 9x. Okay, so here for sure I'm going to need both of these to be negative because my middle term is negative. Okay, so when your middle term is negative and your third term is positive, both of these will need to be negative. Okay, because a negative times a negative is a positive, and then when you add, you want a negative over here. So notice here, I'm going to go ahead and put a negative 7 with the 2x inside here, and then minus 1 here. And let me show you why. Notice here, if I multiply 2x times negative 1, I get negative 2x. If I multiply negative 7 times x, I get negative 7x. If I add those two, I get negative 9x. And that's exactly what I have here. Okay, now we're not done yet. We just factored it so far. Okay, now what we have to do here is we need to solve. Now if you remember from the last lesson, we just get the opposite of this number here. So one of my solutions is x equals positive 1. Okay, now my other solution is going to come from this expression here, 2x minus 7 equals 0. Now you're probably thinking, okay, just take the opposite of negative 7, that's going to be positive 7. Well, you're almost right. Okay, you're halfway correct. You do take the opposite of this number, which is positive 7. But notice here I put a fraction bar. Well, the fraction is because we need to put this number underneath. Okay, now if you're wondering, wait, why? Why is it 7 over 2? Well, let's just simplify here. Let's go ahead and do 2x minus 7 equals 0. So solve for x, you just gotta add 7 on both sides. And then you end up with 2x equals 7. And then what's the next step? Divided by 2. And then you get x equals 7 over 2, which is what we have here. So shortcut would be just to take the opposite of this number. The opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. And put it over that number there. Okay? So those are my two solutions. Next, let's go ahead and subtract 8x. Notice that one has the x term, so I'm going to put it underneath the x term on the other side. And so that cancels. I'm left with 0 here. And then I have 4x squared plus, now what's 16 minus 8? It's 8x. And then plus 3. Okay? So now we just simplify here by factoring. So we're going to go ahead and factor. This is going to be 2x times 2x. Now, it could be 4x times 1. I don't know yet. First, I'm going to try 2x and 2x, okay? And then 3 is just 3 times 1. Notice how this is positive and that's positive, so these could both be positive. Now, I'm just going to play around with it. Notice here, I need an 8 in between. So if I put a 3 here, okay? Notice here, if I multiply the two outer terms here, 2x times 3, that's 6x, okay? If I put the 1 here, then that's 1 times 2x is 2x. So 6x plus 2x, that's 8x. So we're good. Okay? But remember, we're not done yet. Okay? So one of my solutions is going to be take the opposite of this. Remember, if there's a number here, we got to put that at the bottom of the fraction. So take the opposite of positive 1, that's going to be negative 1. And then right there, over 2. Okay? The next answer is going to be the opposite of that, which is negative 3 over 2. So those are my two solutions. Remember, the degree of the polynomial tells us the most amount of solutions that we can have. So we can have at most 2 solutions. Okay, this is this last one here, and we'll move on to a different type of problem. So here we go with add 10, and we're going to add it to the constant here. So I put it. So let's go ahead and add 10 on both sides. 15, the negative 15 and the 10 becomes negative 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring everything else down. So we get 5x squared minus 24x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, let's factor this and then solve. So we're going to split up the 5x squared into 5x times x. That'll be just 5x squared. And notice here I have 5 again. So I'm going to have here, well, I want to get negative 24, okay? So one of these is going to have to be negative and the other one positive because I have a negative 5 there. So it's going to be 5 times 1 for sure. And I want to end up with a negative 24. So notice here, if I put the 5 right there, when I multiply 5x times 5, I'll get the 25, which is what I want because I want to subtract one of them to get the 24, and so that's going to work out perfectly right there. Now all I have to worry about is where to put the negative and where to put the positive, because one of these has to be negative and the other one positive. So I'm going to put the negative here on the 5, and I'll put the 1 there. Notice here 1 times negative 5 is negative 5, but to get the negative 24, notice I need the 5 to be negative. So when I multiply negative 5 times 5, I get negative 25 x. And then 1 times x is just x. Notice here, oops, I should have put there 1x. And then negative 25 plus 1x is going to be negative 24x, which is what I have there. Okay? So let's go ahead and solve each one. So from this one, I'm going to get one solution. That's going to be x equals negative 1 over 5. Now this one here, notice there's just an invisible 1 there, so I don't really need to make it into a fraction. I could just say the opposite of this number and be done with it. So the opposite of negative 5 is going to be positive 5. Okay. Last 3 problems. Now all these are already set equal to 0, so we don't have to worry about that step. But notice here, all of these here have a monomial that I can factor. Remember, a monomial is a single term. So notice here, they all have an x in common, and they're all even. That means I can factor out a 2x. Okay, so let's go ahead and factor that out. And so let's see, what am I left with here? I'm left with an x squared. Remember, to factor means to undistribute. Now, negative 30 divided by 2, that's going to be negative 15. And then I have x. Okay. And then 100 divided by 2 is going to be 50. And notice the x is already undistributed there, or factored out. So I have 2x times this trinomial equals 0. Okay. Now keep in mind that this degree is 3. That means we're going to have up to 3 solutions. Okay. So let's go ahead and factor this trinomial here. Let's try to factor it, see if it works. It will work. And so this will be x times x. That's x squared. And then 50. Okay, well, remember, I need negative 15 here, so let's do 10 times 5. There you go, that's 50, and isn't that 15 if I add them? But I need to make them both negative, so put minus 10 and minus 5. And don't forget the 2x out here. So notice, wherever we have an x, we can get a solution out of that. So the solution for this one would be just the opposite of that, which is 5. The solution to this will be the opposite of that, which is 10. Now, this one's a little different here. It's not just the opposite of that, okay? Notice here, this is 2 times some number. 2 times what is 0? Well, 0. Okay, so I have my 3 solutions here. Now, if you're not sure about this, again, just set it equal to 0. 2x equals 0. And then solve. Okay, so divide by 2. You get x equals 0 divided by 2. 0. Okay. All right, let's do the next one the same way. So we have x to the third minus 15x squared plus 50x. So I can factor out an x from each of these. Okay, and so then I'm left with x squared minus 15x plus 50. What do you know? It's the same one that we have up here. Okay, that was just a coincidence. So that means that we already know what that factors out to. So this will be x minus 10 and x minus 5. And so again, my two solutions for these will be x equals 5, the opposite of that, and then x equals 10. And what about this one? Well, it's just x by itself. We can think of it as 1 times x. 1 times what is 0? Well, 1 times 0 is 0, so it's going to be x equals 0. Okay? All right, let's finish up with the last one here. Notice here it's written out of order here. It's not in standard form. So let's go ahead and rewrite it in standard form. So this will be negative x cubed minus x squared plus 6x equals 0. Okay? Now this is the first time we've had a negative at the beginning. Okay, it's the leading term and has a negative. So whenever that happens, we need to factor out a negative. Okay, a negative 1 basically. Okay, so notice they all have an x in common, so it's basically going to be a negative x that we're factoring out. Okay, so by factoring out a negative x, that means all these are divided by negative 1, and the signs change. So if I factor out a negative x, that means I'm left with x squared here. Okay, and then if I factored out a negative x here, I'm left with positive x. Notice a negative divided by a negative is a positive. Over here, a positive divided by a negative is going to be a negative, so I get a negative 6. Okay, again, if you were to distribute, negative 1x times x squared, or just negative x times x squared is negative x cubed, and then negative x times positive x is going to be negative x squared, and then a negative times a negative here is going to be a positive 6x, okay? So let's factor that right there into the trinomial, and then right here we just have negative x, which is the same as saying negative 1x, okay? So factor that, that's going to be x times x, and notice here we have negative 6, but we need a positive 1, so that's going to be 3 times 2, and make the 2 negative, okay? So that'll be plus 3 minus 2. Okay, notice here I'll get the negative 6, and then I'll end up with the positive 1. So what are my 3 solutions here? Well, one of them is going to be positive 2. The other one is going to be negative 3. And now this one here, imagine, is just a negative 1 times what number is 0? So what do I have to multiply negative 1 by to get 0? Well, 0. So notice here, whenever you have a monomial with a variable, and you want to solve, it's always going to be 0. Okay, notice it happened here, here, and here.